Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to go on a little journey to tackle one of the biggest questions out there. What is reality, actually made of? Is the world you see around you, is that what's really there? All right now, just do this one simple thing for me. Look at your hand. Go on. It's right there, a part of your immediate, totally undeniable reality. I mean, it seems solid, right? It's got clear boundaries, your hand ends, and the air around it begins. It's just a distinct object. Super simple, super obvious.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Is that solidness, that objectness, a fundamental property of your hand, or is it a distinction that your mind is making? And that one question, right there, puts us at this huge crossroads in understanding, well, everything.
So it turns out, when we try to figure out how we make sense of the world, there are basically two completely different paths we can go down. Okay, so this lays out the two core possibilities. On one side, you have the idea that the universe really is made up of separate things, like little building blocks, and we're just seeing them as they are. But on the other side, what if reality is actually one seamless, undivided whole, and it's our minds that are drawing the lines and carving it up into objects?
All right, so let's go down that first path. It's the one that feels most natural, right? Let's just assume for a minute that objects are fundamentally real and see where that takes us.
I mean, if an object is truly real, it should hold up to a closer look, shouldn't it? So what happens if we take one of these so-called real things and just zoom in? And this right here illustrates the problem perfectly. We start with something solid, like a chair, but as we look closer and closer, that solid chairness just kind of dissolves. First, it breaks down into fibers, then molecules, then atoms, until at the quantum level, the very idea of a distinct, solid thing completely vanishes into this weird haze of probabilities and mostly empty space.
This leads us to this really fascinating idea called scale dependence. Basically, a chair only exists as a chair at our particular human scale. At the molecular scale, it's something totally different, a lattice of atoms. And at the subatomic scale, well, it's something else entirely. The object isn't the fundamental thing here. Our point of view is.
So, you see the problem? We've hit a total wall. Our initial, common sense idea that the world is made of real, separate things leads us down a path to the bizarre conclusion that those very same things don't seem to have any fundamental reality to them at all. It's a paradox. Okay, so path number 1 was a dead end. Let's back up and try path number 2. How does this build a different picture of reality? What if objects aren't real and instead the universe is just this one unified whole that we are interpreting? Now, this idea, it neatly solves our disappearing object problem. Of course, a chair dissolves when we look closer if it was never a fundamental thing to begin with. But while this path solves one problem, it opens up a whole new and maybe even bigger can of worms. Yeah, this raises some really deep questions. Like, if everything is one interconnected whole, how can we even do science? I mean, the observer and the experiment aren't really separates, are they? And where does the ability to see a chair instead of just, undivided wholeness even come from? And maybe the biggest one, how are we, as parts of this whole, even capable of making these distinctions in the first place? From this point of view, it suggests that even our most powerful tools for describing the universe, things like mathematics, well, they're not really showing us fundamental reality. They're more like languages. Languages we invented, based on the distinctions we make to describe our interpretation of reality. And they're probably just approximations at best. So, we've walked down two completely different paths, and neither one has led to a nice, comfortable answer. So, where does that leave us?
Well, it leaves us right here, staring at the very edge of what we can possibly understand. Path number 1, the idea of a world full of separate objects, just leads to a paradox. The closer you look for a thing, the more it just disappears into nothing. And path number 2, the idea that reality is an undivided whole, it creates its own massive puzzle. If we're part of that whole, how on earth can we observe it or even carve out distinctions in the first place? Both roads lead to these huge and what seem to be unanswerable questions.
And this, maybe, is the most profound takeaway of all. When you're facing questions this monumental, the only honest approach is just humility. We have to accept that our most fundamental assumptions about reality are exactly that, assumptions. We can have our beliefs, but we might never really know for sure.
Which, of course, leaves us with one final, kind of haunting question.
if the reality of solid, separate objects is really just an interpretation, and we are the interpreters, then what does that make us? What are we, really?